Martha's hands were always tired, cracked, calloused, worn like the soles of her old sneakers. They weren't the hands of someone who lived. They were the hands of someone who gave her life away piece by piece. Every morning, long before the sun dared to rise, Martha wrapped herself in her thin coat, stained at the sleeves and stitched in quiet desperation, and stepped out into the cold. The city never slept. Neither did she. For over 20 years, she juggled two jobs, cleaning glass towers in the morning that she'd never stepped foot in as a guest, and scrubbing floors in a diner at night where no one remembered her name. Not for comfort, not for rest. She did it all for one reason: her son, Jacob. She bore her exhaustion like armor, hiding the cracks behind quiet smiles. Her knees ached. Her fingers bled. But Jacob never knew. She made sure of it. While other children brought peanut butter sandwiches, Jacob had a steaming thermos packed with stew. Martha often skipped dinner, sipping hot water and pretending it was tea, just so her boy could have seconds. Her coat? Too thin for the wind, but she wore it anyway, clutching it close and whispering, "Still warm enough." But when Jacob's shoes tore at the seams, she walked an extra 3 miles to find a discount store across town, just to buy the best pair she could afford. He would never feel less than. Not her boy. Martha didn't just work hard, she lived righteously. On weekends, she cooked in battered pots, feeding the homeless from reused plastic containers. At church, she didn't pray for riches. She prayed for Jacob's future. She lit candles for the sick, for strangers, for the world. She never once prayed for herself. Neighbors watched her with quiet awe. "She gives more than she has," they murmured. "She's running on empty." But Martha only smiled, soft and tired, and said, "If my son is okay, I'm full." She believed in a God who watched over quiet sacrifices, a God who saw every skipped meal, every blister, every tear hidden in the shower. She believed that love wasn't soft. Love was choosing someone else's comfort over your own, every single time. At night, when the world quieted and her bones felt like glass, she dropped to her knees beside her thin mattress, too worn to be called a bed, and whispered into the dark, "Dear Lord, let his life be easier than mine." She didn't dream of vacations. She dreamed of Jacob in a warm office, in a clean shirt, shaking hands respected. Not like her, not invisible. That was her reward. That was enough, or so she believed. Jacob grew into the man Martha had always prayed he would become: kind, respectful, hard-working. He landed a great job after college, wore a suit just like she imagined, and at first he never missed a Sunday dinner or forgot to kiss her forehead before leaving. He'd say, "I'll never forget what you've done for me, Mom." And Martha believed him. But everything began to change the day he met her. Her name was Claire. She was white, beautiful, and came from a wealthy family who lived in the hills above the city. Martha didn't judge her for her skin color or status. She only watched, quietly, as the woman her son loved began to dim the light in his eyes, the light that used to shine just for her. At first it was small things. Jacob stopped calling as often. He skipped their Sunday dinners. When she asked if he'd come by to help fix the sink, he said he was too busy. Too busy for the woman who scrubbed floors just to keep food on his plate. Martha's heart ached, but she smiled anyway. "He's in love," she told herself. And because she was a mother first, she welcomed Claire into her heart, though Claire barely noticed. At dinner, Claire scrolled on her phone. She never said thank you. She turned her nose up at Martha's home-cooked meals. When Martha offered to help with wedding plans, Claire gave her a fake smile and said, "Don't worry, we've got it covered." They married quickly. Claire's family hosted a grand ceremony. Martha sat quietly in the second row, wearing the only dress she owned, a hand-me-down she had hemmed herself. No one introduced her. No one asked who she was, but she clapped the loudest. She smiled the warmest. Because her son was happy, or so she hoped. Jacob began to change even more. He never brought Claire to their old neighborhood. He didn't want her to see where he came from. He was ashamed. To impress her family, he started spending money he didn't have. Designer watches, fancy dinners, gifts for Claire's parents that cost more than Martha earned in a month. He took out loans, maxed out his credit cards, and then, just like that, he lost his job. Claire didn't want to downsize, so Jacob made a choice. They would move into Martha's home, just until things got better. Martha welcomed them with open arms. Her small house suddenly crowded, her fridge emptied twice as fast. But she was glad to have her son close again. Until one morning, Claire complained, "I don't have space for my clothes. That tiny guest room is useless." That evening, Jacob pulled Martha aside. "Mom, Claire needs the extra room. Do you think you could move your things into the garage? Just for a little while?" The words struck like ice water to the chest. Her room, her space, the only place in the world that was hers. But she looked into her son's pleading eyes and swallowed the pain. "Of course," she said softly. "If it helps you, I'll manage." That night, she carried her blankets into the cold garage, the same one that stored tools, lawn equipment, and broken furniture. She sat on a cot beside a lawnmower and looked up at the wooden beams above her. She didn't cry. She prayed, "God, if this is the burden I must bear for Jacob's happiness, then I accept it." Because that's who Martha was. A woman who gave, even when nothing was left to give. A mother whose love was bigger than her pain. But heaven heard every word, and this story was far from over. The garage was cold at night, but Martha never complained. She folded her thin blanket neatly each morning, stacked her few remaining clothes in a milk crate, and reminded herself that this was temporary, that her son, her sweet Jacob, would get back on his feet. He just needed time. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The tension in the house grew heavier with each overdue bill. Jacob had been rejected from 3 job interviews. Claire refused to work. She said pregnancy was stressful enough. The credit card companies started calling. The mortgage was late. The car payment bounced. One night after dinner, Jacob stood in the doorway to the garage, nervously wringing his hands. "Mom, can we talk?" Martha looked up from her knitting. "Of course, baby. What is it?" He sat beside her on the cot, avoiding her eyes. "It's just, things are really tight right now. We're trying, I swear, but it's hard. Claire's pregnant. I'm looking for work. And the bills, they just keep piling up." Martha felt a chill, not from the cold, but from what she already knew he was about to ask. He hesitated, then finally said it. "Would it be okay if we used your pension? Just for a couple of months. You're not paying rent, and we really need it." She blinked slowly. Her pension, her only source of income. The money she had saved quietly, dollar by dollar, for emergencies, for dignity, for old age. "Just until I find a job," he added quickly. "You always told me family comes first, and you'll be a grandma soon. Don't you want your grandson to have a warm home? Good food? A real chance?" Her heart cracked. Not because he asked, but because he truly didn't see what he was taking from her. Still, she nodded. "Of course," she whispered, her voice trembling, because this was her son, her boy, the reason she woke up at 4 a.m. for 20 years, the reason her hands were cracked and tired. She gave him her savings, and then her monthly pension, and smiled through her heartbreak. That Sunday, she walked to church alone. Her coat barely kept out the wind. She lit a candle not for herself but for Jacob. She didn't pray for money, or warmth, or comfort. She knelt and whispered, "Lord, give him wisdom. Help him remember who he is. Let him find his way back, not just to work, but to compassion, to honor, to the little boy who used to pray with me at night." Tears streamed down her cheeks, not out of anger, but sorrow, because her son had lost his way, and she had nothing left to give except her faith. Martha was a woman of great love and even greater sacrifice, but no one, not even she, knew how much more she would be asked to endure. Winter came early that year, and with it, loneliness. Martha's hands, once so strong, had started to tremble, not from the cold, but from hunger. She hadn't eaten a full meal in days. Her pension was gone, her savings vanished, and now, no one offered her breakfast anymore. At dinner, she would quietly sit at the edge of the table, if there was room. Claire often served food for 2, and Jacob never noticed. One evening, her voice cracked as she whispered, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not welcome at the table anymore." Jacob looked up from his phone and sighed. Mom, don't start. You're being too sensitive again. You always take things too personally. She nodded, swallowing her hurt. That night in the garage, curled beneath thin blankets, Martha cried for the first time in years. Not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from invisibility. She needed to eat. She needed dignity. Her old jobs were too much now. Her knees ached, her back was worn, and her lungs could no longer handle the harsh chemicals she once scrubbed floors with. One afternoon, while sitting alone on a cracked bench near their house, she met a new neighbor, Rachel, a young mother of two toddlers who had just moved in. Rachel looked overwhelmed. Toys spilled out of her stroller. One child screamed while the other tugged on her coat. Martha smiled gently and offered a handkerchief. They talked. Rachel shared her struggles as a stay-at-home mom. No family nearby, no help, no time. Martha listened, and then quietly said, "If you ever need a hand, I'm looking for work. I'm slow, but I'm careful." Rachel's face lit up like a sunrise. "Are you serious? That would be a blessing. I need someone like you. I'll pay you fairly, I promise." And so a new chapter began. Martha walked to Rachel's house every morning, cleaned, cooked, helped with the children. She was slow, yes, but precise, honest, tireless. Her body ached, but she never let it show, because this work came with something she hadn't felt in a long time: kindness. Rachel treated her with warmth, offered tea, asked how she slept, made sure she ate. Martha didn't know what to do with such care. At first it embarrassed her, but the children adored her, and slowly her heart softened. She thanked God every night for a roof for these sweet children, for Rachel's kindness, and for my son. No matter what, Lord, thank you for Jacob. But one cold evening, returning from work with a bag of discounted groceries, she turned the corner and stopped in her tracks. A moving truck stood in front of the house. Men were loading her furniture, her beloved old dresser, the floral armchair she saved for years to buy, even the antique mirror from her mother. All of it. Gone. She dropped the bag. Panicked, she rushed toward the trash bins, only to find a shoebox filled with photos. Her parents, her childhood, her wedding, a letter from Jacob's father, even her knitting yarn neatly wound but thrown in the dirt. She ran to the front door, heart pounding. Jacob stood there, arms crossed. "Mom, don't freak out, okay? We sold a few things. We needed the money. It's not like you were using that stuff in the garage." Her voice trembled. "Jacob, these were mine. Why didn't you ask me?" He avoided her gaze. "Because it's not about stuff. Claire's pregnant. We have to prepare. Your pension isn't enough. This is our home now, too. You always say family shares everything." She tried to step inside. She needed to see what was left. But he stopped her. "Claire's resting. She doesn't need stress right now. Don't bring your emotions into this, Mom." But from the doorway, she saw it all. The walls were repainted, the curtains replaced. Family photos were gone. In their place were framed quotes and brand new furniture. Her home, her history, erased. She turned back to the garage. It was all she had left. That night, she didn't cry. She sat on the cold floor, holding the box of photographs to her chest. Her heart felt hollow. "Is this the cost of love?" she whispered to no one. Still, she lit a small candle near her cot and prayed. Not for justice, not even for warmth, but for forgiveness. Because her love had no limits, even if it broke her. Something inside Martha broke the day she saw her life packed into a truck. It wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It was quiet, like a door slowly closing, never to be opened again. Since that day, her eyes lost some of their light. She still prayed. She still smiled. She still thanked God for her son. But the warmth she used to feel in her chest when she spoke his name, it had dimmed. Weeks passed. Martha never stopped working, even as her hands trembled more, even as her joints screamed in pain, even as her skin grew pale and her legs felt heavy beneath her. She said nothing. To Rachel, she was cheerful as ever, offering to mop, cook, rock the baby to sleep. "Let me help," she'd say, even when her knees buckled as she bent down. Rachel noticed her growing thinner, but Martha would laugh and wave it off. "Old age, that's all. I'm fine. My son is doing well. That's what matters. She never spoke of the garage, never mentioned the cold, never admitted she often went to bed hungry, because in her heart she believed a mother doesn't burden her child, a mother carries the weight. But one quiet afternoon, while folding laundry, Martha suddenly wavered. The room spun, her vision blurred. Then, she collapsed. The laundry basket hit the ground. So did she. Rachel heard the crash from the kitchen and rushed in. "Martha!" She screamed her name, shook her shoulders. No response. Her skin was cold, her breathing shallow. Rachel didn't hesitate. She called an ambulance. At the hospital, time moved slowly. Rachel sat in the sterile hallway, her hands trembling. When the doctors emerged, their expressions were grim. "She's malnourished," one said. "Severely. Her body is worn down. Years of overwork, cold exposure, likely untreated chronic conditions. She's also dehydrated, anemic, and has signs of hypothermia." Rachel was stunned. She'd had no idea. Martha had always smiled, always said, "I'm blessed," always bragged about her son, the job he used to have, his bright future, his coming baby. Rachel felt her heart sink. How could someone this kind be suffering so silently? Even the doctors were in disbelief. "She never once complained?" one asked. "Not once," Rachel whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Instead of asking for help, Martha had carried her pain with grace. She had wrapped it in pride and called it strength. And it broke Rachel. This woman who cooked for her children, who scrubbed her floors, who always greeted her with warmth, had been starving, freezing, fading right in front of her. Rachel felt guilt crawl through her chest. How had she not seen it? She left the hospital with Martha's small bag of belongings, stunned and grieving, but determined. She would find out what had really happened to Martha. She would go to that house. She would look that son in the eye. Because what had been done to this woman, this saint, was not just neglect, it was betrayal. And Rachel was done being quiet. Rachel didn't go home straight from the hospital. She couldn't. She needed to pick up some things for Martha, her blanket, her reading glasses, maybe a change of clothes, something familiar, something that might bring her a little comfort in that sterile hospital room. She made her way to Martha's house, well, her son's house now. It had always looked warm from the outside, but today it felt cold, like the truth was hiding behind the shutters. Rachel knocked. It was Jacob who opened the door. He looked surprised for a split second, but not at the news of his mother's hospitalization. Not even a flicker of worry crossed his face. Instead, he shrugged. "Well, and at least now we don't have to look for a new place. The baby's coming soon. More room for us now." Rachel blinked. "What?" His words struck like ice. He wasn't broken. He wasn't scared. He was relieved. "She'll be fine," he added casually. "She's tough. Always has been." Rachel's heart began to pound. "I just came to pick up a few of her things," she said, her voice tight. But before she could step inside, his wife appeared behind him. "Sorry," the woman said flatly. "There's nothing of hers here." Rachel frowned. "What do you mean? Where are her clothes? Her things?" The wife gave a dismissive gesture toward the side of the house. "She lives in the garage." Rachel froze. For a moment she thought she'd misheard, but the woman was already walking away. "Anything she owns is out there." Jacob didn't look at her. He just stepped back and shut the door. Rachel stood for a long moment, stunned, then turned and walked toward the garage. She opened the flimsy side door and stepped inside, and gasped. It wasn't a room. It was a storage space. Dark, cluttered, cold. There was no insulation, no proper flooring. Just a thin mattress on a slab of concrete beside lawn tools and rusted gardening supplies. A small table with a broken lamp. A box of threadbare clothes. Some prayer cards. That was it. A wave of nausea hit her. This was where Martha had been living? In the winter? In this damp, freezing box? Rachel covered her mouth, tears rising in her eyes. She looked around and saw the signs of quiet suffering everywhere. A worn Bible with marked pages. A knitted shawl folded with care, though it barely offered warmth. A chipped mug with half a packet of tea tucked inside. This was not a place for a human being, let alone a woman who had spent her life giving everything for her child. Rachel staggered out of the garage, furious, heartbroken, shaking. She couldn't believe what she'd seen. She hadn't known. Martha had never said a word, and now she was lying in a hospital bed, her body broken from cold and hunger, while her only son treated her like an inconvenience. Rachel walked away, her fists clenched and her chest burning. This wasn't just neglect, it was cruelty, and someone needed to answer for it. Rachel sat at the edge of her bed that night, still shaken by what she had seen in the garage. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Martha's thin frame, curled beneath a pile of old blankets, surrounded by garden tools and silence. She had told her husband everything, every detail. He was an attorney, calm, rational, and not easily moved. But even he had gone pale when she showed him photos of the garage. She needs to sue them, Rachel had insisted, voice shaking. There has to be justice. She can't just be thrown away like she didn't matter. Her husband nodded. I'll handle it. I'll visit her tomorrow. The next morning, he went to the hospital, documents in hand, consent forms, legal paperwork, everything ready. But when he came home later that day, Rachel could see it in his eyes. Martha had said no. She looked at me, he said softly, and said, "It's not worth it." Rachel's chest tightened. She said she was tired, that her time had already run its course. She didn't want to spend her final days arguing over money or betrayal. Rachel sat in the stunned silence. She said, "It's okay. I just want peace now." He didn't tell her everything. He didn't repeat the part where Martha said that the cold no longer scared her, that she wasn't angry, just heartbroken. 2 days later, Rachel stood quietly outside a hospital room that no longer held her friend. The world had lost a woman who had carried more than her share of pain, a woman whose strength had never been recognized the way it should have been. Rachel clutched a small box to her chest. Inside were a few of Martha's belongings, her shawl, a rosary, a small book of prayers, and a teacup. Things no one else had wanted. As she turned to leave, a nurse approached her. "You're Rachel?" she asked gently. Rachel nodded. The nurse handed her a sealed envelope. "She asked us to give you this. Said it was important." Rachel opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, written in careful, shaky handwriting. "Dear Rachel, if my life ever held a miracle, it was meeting you. You treated me with kindness when I had nothing to give. You spoke to me like I mattered. You let me feel warm again. You never judged. You never pitied. You saw me. Thank you for making me feel human again. Please don't be sad for me. I've made peace with everything. I forgive everyone. I only hope that one day my son finds his way back to the light." On the back of this letter is a copy of my final wish. The house belongs to you now. Let it be a place of love and truth. Let laughter live there again. To my son, I leave the garage. He made it mine. I return the favor. Love, Martha. Rachel pressed the letter to her chest and began to cry. Not just tears of grief, but of fury, love, heartbreak, and honor. Martha had lived and left with quiet dignity, but Rachel would make sure her name was remembered, not as a woman who suffered, but as one who gave everything and loved even more.